How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the current state of Delta Force and FPS games as a whole. Now, I'm not the type to do commentaries like this, and I'll probably miss a few points or fail to elaborate on some of the things I have to say, so if you have questions, thoughts, or opinions, then be sure to drop a comment down below. Now let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is live service. In my opinion, live service is single-handedly killing the FPS genre and gaming as a whole. I've been playing games for nearly 20 years, and back in the day, devs couldn't just release an update on a whim. If something was unbalanced, or if there were game-breaking glitches or exploits, the devs had to re-release a whole new version of the game. This meant that the devs and QA testers had to spend countless hours actually playing their games to make sure that everything was perfect. Nowadays, the devs port over old assets and resources, give it some shiny new 4K textures, add some nostalgia bait, and then they wait for their lab rats to find the real problems. Me and you are the lab rats, by the way. The internet is also part of the problem in a sense. Back in the day, there was no quick and easy way for players to let the devs know about any game-breaking bugs. But now, it takes less than 2 minutes to hop on a forum to find the biggest issues in said game. XDefiant revealed more than a few issues with live service. The game was not ready for release whatsoever. The only thing players could do was grind for weapon camos or shill money in the live store. And mechanics like kill cams were meant to be put in the game later in its life cycle, with no real time frame as to when it was being introduced into the game. And when XDefiant was cancelled, it was revealed that they had all of their Year 1 content and a good amount of their Year 2 content ready and waiting to be drip-fed to the player base throughout Year 1 and 2. And that's the same thing being done to every live service game. These games release half-baked with game-breaking glitches that affect the majority of the player base, and there's no real content that you can grind for. Base content is cut out to be reintroduced as DLC later down the game's lifespan, and in the case of Call of Duty, entire mechanics are cut out to be put into future titles as its main selling point. Call of Duty games have always been copies of the games that came before it, and back in the day, it was justified. During the glory days of Call of Duty, there weren't thousands of devs constantly working on the current game and future games to come. It was just a few hundred devs that were actually passionate about the games that they made. Coming back to the modern day, there's still copying and pasting assets, except it's driven out of pure laziness and a lack of passion from these dev teams. But what's the problem with Delta Force specifically? A big problem is the matchmaking. It should be painfully obvious at this point that there is skill-based matchmaking in the game, but the devs insist that there are only two matchmaking brackets. One bracket is for new players, and one bracket is for experienced players. But that's simply not the case. There's already plenty of YouTubers like Focus and Enders that have taken the time to create brand new accounts to see what the deal actually is with the matchmaking, and every one of them found out that the matchmaking doesn't protect new players from experienced players, it just protects the bad players from the good players, which is what SBMM does in every game. You can literally tell skill-based matchmaking is in the game while you're sitting in a queue. While you're waiting in a lobby for a match to start, the game will tell you how long it should take to find a match, but anytime the timer passes that estimated time to find a match, it'll say something along the lines of, "The queue time is too long, expanding range." And that's not something you'd ever see in games like XDefiant or older COD games or even Battlefield. The only reason you'd be stuck in a queue for a long time is if there aren't a lot of people playing at the same time as you. But conveniently, the devs use this excuse to their advantage to hide the fact that they have SBMM. At the time of making this video, Delta Force has 22,000 players on Steam. A good chunk of those players are on Operations, but let's say theoretically that 50% of those players are on Warfare. That means that there's almost 200 different matches I could play. So why is it that players are waiting a minimum of 10 minutes to find one match, during peak hours nonetheless? Not to mention that Delta Force can be downloaded straight from the website or from the Epic Game Store, so there are a lot of other players you should be matching up against. Another big issue is their lack of communication. You can see that the Delta Force socials are very active, but they aren't really acknowledging what any of the players have to say. To be fair, at least 90% of people commenting on these posts just want the game to release on console, but there are a lot of people who are sharing some genuine questions and concerns just to be completely ignored by whoever is behind these socials. And sure, the social team probably knows little to nothing about what's to come in future updates, but that's something that needs to be improved upon as soon as possible. They do post their upcoming updates on all of their socials, but these days, who isn't? Another problem with Delta Force that every other FPS game is experiencing is a lack of content. Around the time of the game's release, the devs promised that there would be weekly updates. Unlike other promises they'd made, this is one that they've kept up to this day, but most people assumed we'd see constant balance changes, more weapons, maps, and permanent game modes. But instead, we've seen constant event updates and changes, which gives us nothing but XP tokens and cards that can be spent on what are essentially loot boxes. The Year 1 roadmap seems to be filled with a decent amount of content, but each season lasts 3 months long, and everything is given to us at the beginning of each season instead of being spread throughout the season. And like I was saying earlier with XDefiant, it wouldn't be a surprise to find out that the devs have all of their Year 1 content waiting to be put into the game. Everything else is a bit nitpicky in my opinion. If certain weapons weren't locked behind different classes, there would be no incentive to use any class besides the recon or support class. I've never seen an engineer use their rockets to take out vehicles, and I've never seen an engineer help repair a friendly vehicle either. And medics, they're notorious for not reviving their teammates in this game. It is so easy to toss smoke on a down teammate and revive them in literally 1 second, but players only use the support class because it's meta. A majority of support players have no intentions to actually help their teammates, and it's getting annoying at this point. I hope we can see some real challenges and rewards in the future, something like revive 200 players that support for this operator skin, or destroy 100 vehicles for this weapon camo, just so players actually have a reason to properly play as these operators and classes, apart from wanting to use a specific weapon. Maybe the devs could just allow us to use any weapon on any operator we want, but we'll just have to see. The weapons themselves are pretty balanced. They have their own differences that can make them stand out, but for the most part, these weapons feel incredibly similar, to the point where they can just blur together. A majority of ARs and SMGs have a time to kill between 0.3 and 0.4 seconds within their max damage range, regardless of damage or fire rate. And nearly every weapon can beam you from 100 meters or further in less than 10 shots. There are a couple of weapons that can potentially stand out from others, but it feels like there's no variety because of how similar these weapons are at the end of the day. I also want to mention attachments themselves. There's absolutely no variety with weapon attachments, even with the abundance we have. Whenever I pick a weapon to build, I just pick the Sandstorm or Bastion compensator, the Resonant or Secret Order for a grip, an extended mag, a grip with no negative attributes, and a stock with no negative attributes, and by the end, I just made the next meta build for a weapon. I've seen no real reason to use any other attachments because they just can't compete. Controller support is also something we're waiting for as well. As a keyboard and mouse player, I am a bit nervous to find out how intense the aim assist is going to be, but this is something that could increase the dying player count, which is something this game really needs as of right now. And one thing I'm very concerned about is crossplay between mobile and PC. I haven't found any solid confirmation that mobile and PC players can match up with each other, but it is still very possible. If this does happen, we're just going to have another Combat Master fiasco, and that's going to entirely remove any fun left in this game. This game has an incredible amount of potential, and this was one of my favorite games when I started playing. I still enjoy it to an extent, but there's nothing to do. The limited time modes aren't all that good, and instead of every map being available on these modes, it's usually 1 or 2. And usually, the devs pick the players' least favorite maps in the game to use. I feel like this game was well received by players, but the devs have single-handedly killed the momentum that this game had, and it's disappointing to see. This game felt well polished on release, especially when you compare it to any video game released in the last 6 or 7 years. But the devs just had to take the live service route to stay trendy and to compete with other FPS games currently out on the market. If the devs took some more time to add extra content in the game before release, then I don't think I'd even be sitting here making this video. But I think it's time we as consumers put our foot down. I know most people lack the restraint and willpower to actually stand up to these companies, especially when these devs pull out some nostalgia bait, but we need to put our money back in our own hands. The only reason the gaming industry has gotten this bad is because we've let it get this bad. I don't necessarily believe the gaming industry has gotten too popular. I think we've just been too lenient with these companies, and that's what needs to change. These companies are more worried about their investors than they are about their own player base, and they fail to realize that their player base is what made them their money in the first place. Investors might be a bit unhappy if the devs take the games in their own hands, but there will be nothing to invest in if there is no player base. But what are some issues you've been noticing on Delta Force? I am trying my hardest to get back on the game and play, so drop a comment if you want to see a specific weapon shown off in the future. There isn't a whole lot to say besides that, so I'll see you all in the next video.